The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over our suburban neighborhood. I sat on the back porch of our home, sipping a glass of bourbon while the scent of the grilled salmon wafted through the air. It was one of those perfect evenings where everything felt in harmony, except for the unsettling knot in my stomach. I watched Ariana move gracefully around the kitchen, her long hair cascading over her shoulders, a picture of elegance as she plated dinner. She looked up and caught my gaze, offering a radiant smile that momentarily eased my worries. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. We'd been married for over a decade, but lately a distance had crept between us, one that neither of us seemed willing to acknowledge. As we sat down to eat, the conversation flowed, though it felt more like a performance than genuine interaction. Ariana spoke about her day at work, animatedly discussing a new project with her team, but my mind wandered to Mark. He had been around more often, and I couldn't help but notice the way he looked at her, the subtle glances, the lingering touches during casual conversations. It unnerved me, but I pushed the thoughts aside, reminding myself of the trust we had built over the years. After dinner, we settled into our usual routine. I turned on the TV while Ariana poured herself a glass of red wine, her favorite. I admired the way she looked in her fitted dress, the way it hugged her curves just right. My heart raced, remembering the nights when our passion felt electric, the kind of heat that seemed to ignite the air around us. But that spark felt dulled lately, overshadowed by my suspicions. Ariana leaned closer to me on the couch, her shoulder brushing against mine as she laughed at a scene on the screen. I inhaled her scent, a mixture of vanilla and something floral, and felt the familiar tug of desire. I wanted to reach for her, to pull her close and remind her of the chemistry we once had, but a voice in my head whispered doubts. "Do you remember that summer we spent at the lake?" I asked, trying to pull us back to a time when things felt right. Her eyes lit up, and for a moment, the tension faded. "How could I forget? You almost sank the boat trying to impress me with your fishing skills," she teased, laughter spilling from her lips. I chuckled, but the humor felt strained. I noticed the way her gaze drifted to her phone, her smile faltering just a bit. "I should check my messages," she said, rising to grab her phone from the kitchen. As she stepped away, my heart raced with an unsettling mix of jealousy and desire. I watched her as she scrolled through her messages, a frown crossing her face. Was it Mark? The thought ignited a fire in my chest, pushing me toward a decision I hadn't fully considered. "Everything okay?" I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. She glanced over her shoulder, her expression shifting to one of casual indifference. "Yeah, just work stuff," she replied, but the way she avoided my eyes told me otherwise. That evening, as the darkness enveloped our home, I wrestled with the conflicting emotions swirling inside me. I felt drawn to her, yet the shadow of doubt loomed large. The intimacy we once shared felt strained, and the thought of losing her terrified me. I decided I would confront her, but not yet. I wanted to know more, to understand the nature of her relationship with Mark, to gauge how deep this was. A few days passed, and I found myself caught in a web of my own making. Every time I saw Ariana laughing or touching Mark's arm during one of our get-togethers, my heart twisted with a mix of anger and an undeniable thrill. It was infuriating and intoxicating all at once. That Saturday, we hosted a small gathering at our home. Mark arrived early, the sun glistening off his polished car as he parked in our driveway. He walked in with a charm that always made my friends laugh, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was too comfortable in our space, too familiar with my wife. The three of us shared drinks, and I watched as Ariana leaned closer to him, her laughter ringing out like music. As the evening wore on, the alcohol flowed, and the atmosphere turned electric. There was a tension in the air, palpable and thick. I caught a glimpse of Ariana's hand resting on Mark's knee as they shared a joke. My heart raced, not only from jealousy but from a strange fascination. I felt like a voyeur, watching a scene unfold that I shouldn't be witnessing. The thought both excited and horrified me. When the party wound down, and our friends began to leave, I pulled Ariana aside, needing to speak to her privately. "Can we talk?" I asked, trying to mask the turmoil inside me. "Sure, what's up?" she replied, a hint of surprise in her eyes. I searched for the right words, my mind racing through the implications of what I was about to say. I wanted to ask her about Mark, about what I had seen, but instead, I found myself saying, "I miss us. I miss the way we used to be." Her expression softened, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. "I do too, Christopher. Life just gets so busy, you know?" Busy. That word echoed in my mind, a convenient excuse. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "What about Mark? You seem really close with him." Ariana hesitated, her gaze flickering away for just a second. "He's just a friend, Christopher. You know how it is at work." "It's nothing." "Nothing," I repeated, but my heart didn't believe it. The line between friend and something more felt dangerously thin, and I was standing on the edge, teetering between confronting the truth and drowning in my own insecurities. The night ended with an uneasy truce. I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were shifting in ways I didn't fully understand. As I lay in bed, I turned to watch Ariana sleep, her face serene. I felt an overwhelming urge to protect what we had, but how could I do that when the ground beneath us felt so shaky? In the darkness, I resolved to discover the truth, whatever that truth might be. The following days were a blur of emotions. I navigated my work at the architecture firm, my mind constantly drifting back to Ariana and Mark. I found myself playing out scenarios in my head, each more destructive than the last, wondering what their interactions entailed behind closed doors. The jealousy twisted in my stomach like a live wire, electrifying my thoughts and fueling an insatiable curiosity. One evening, after a long day, I returned home to find Ariana in the living room, the soft glow of the table lamp illuminating her as she scrolled through her phone. She looked up, and the corners of her lips curled into a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. I could sense the tension hanging between us like a thick fog, ready to burst. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, her voice bright but slightly distant. "Busy, like always," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "Yours?" "Pretty good. Just wrapping up a project," she said, but I caught the fleeting shadow of something behind her words. "Mark helped me brainstorm some ideas." The mention of Mark sent a jolt through me, a spark of something raw and primal. "That's great," I said, but the words felt hollow. Ariana stood and walked over to the kitchen, her movements graceful yet guarded. I followed her, feeling a mix of desire and frustration. I wanted to bridge the growing chasm between us, but I was also consumed by thoughts of her closeness to him. As she poured a glass of wine, I stepped closer, allowing my breath to catch in my throat. The scent of her shampoo, sweet and intoxicating, filled the air. "Ariana, can we talk about this?" I ventured, my voice low and steady. She turned to me, a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "About what?" "About Mark. I can't help but feel like there's more between you two than you're letting on," I said, my heart pounding. Ariana paused, the wine glass hovering near her lips. "It's complicated, Christopher. He's just someone I can talk to," she admitted, the words tumbling out as if they were a secret too heavy to bear. "But you talk to me," I replied, stepping even closer, the heat radiating from her body drawing me in. "What's changed?" "I don't know," she murmured, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Things just feel different lately." "Different how?" I pressed, my voice dropping further. The tension crackled between us, a spark waiting to ignite. Before she could respond, I reached out, brushing my fingers against her arm, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath the fabric of her shirt. "I miss you, Ariana." "I miss us," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. In that moment, something shifted. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and filled with an uncertainty that mirrored my own. "I miss us too," she admitted, and the vulnerability in her voice pulled at my heart. The distance that had been growing between us seemed to close in an instant. I leaned in closer, drawn to her like a moth to a flame. Our lips met, tentative at first, but quickly igniting into something deeper. I tasted the wine on her tongue, the familiar sweetness igniting a fire within me. It felt like a balm on the wounds of betrayal I was still nursing, a reminder of the passion we once shared. As we kissed, I felt her body melt against mine, the tension of the past few weeks dissipating into the heat of the moment. I wanted to forget everything, Mark, the doubts, the heartache. I deepened the kiss, my hands moving to cradle her face, savoring the softness of her skin. But as the kiss deepened, the shadows of my suspicions lingered at the back of my mind, reminding me that this moment was built on fragile foundations. I pulled away slightly, breathless, searching her eyes for the truth. "Can we get back to where we were?" I asked, vulnerability cracking through my words. Ariana bit her lip, her gaze searching mine. "I want that, Christopher. I really do," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. Just then, the doorbell rang, shattering the moment like glass. We both froze, the air suddenly heavy with the weight of reality crashing back in. I could feel my heart racing, a mix of dread and hope swirling within me. "I'll get it," I said, trying to shake off the remnants of our intimacy as I moved to the door. When I opened it, I found Mark standing there, his casual smile somehow infuriatingly charming. "Hey, thought I'd stop by and see how the evening was going," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Ariana shot me a look, and I could see her composure falter. "Mark, hey! We were just—" she started, but I cut her off, feeling a protective instinct flare up. "We were just finishing up dinner," I said, my tone more clipped than I intended. "What brings you by?" "Oh, just wanted to talk about the fitness program I've been developing," he said, his eyes flicking between us, oblivious to the tension that had just erupted. I forced a smile, but inside, I felt the anger and frustration boiling. How could he not see the fragility of our situation? I watched as Ariana's demeanor shifted, her earlier warmth evaporating as she returned to her role of the accommodating wife. "Sure, let's go to the living room," she said, her voice brightening as she moved away from me, back to her comfort zone. I stayed behind for a moment, feeling like an intruder in my own life, torn between the desire to confront Mark and the aching need to maintain the fragile peace we had just built. As they settled on the couch, I grabbed a drink to mask my frustration, but the taste soured in my mouth. I could see them engaging easily, their chemistry palpable, and it gnawed at me. What did they share that I didn't know? How deep did this connection go? "Hey, Christopher, you should join us," Mark said, breaking through my thoughts. "I was just telling Ariana about the new training sessions I'm planning. You could really benefit from it." I forced a laugh, but the bitterness rose in my throat. "Yeah, maybe," I replied, trying to sound casual, though every word felt like a dagger. As the conversation continued, I found myself watching them closely, studying every interaction. The way they leaned toward each other, the shared laughter that felt just a little too intimate. It sent a jolt of jealousy through me, igniting a desire not just for Ariana, but to reclaim what felt lost between us. In that moment, a plan began to form in my mind. If I couldn't confront Ariana directly about Mark, I would have to find a way to understand their relationship. I needed to uncover the truth, to lay bare the secrets that lingered just below the surface. I would play the part of the supportive husband, but I would do so with one eye on the prize, the truth about her feelings for Mark and what that meant for our marriage. The night wore on, the laughter filling the room, but in my heart, I knew this was just the calm before the storm. I would fight for my wife, but it wouldn't be easy. I just hoped that whatever I discovered wouldn't shatter the fragile connection we were trying to rebuild. The rest of the evening unfolded with a veneer of normalcy, but I felt the tension coiling tighter with every laugh and shared glance between Ariana and Mark. They moved in sync, a rhythm that I used to know intimately with her, yet now felt like an invisible barrier separating us. I forced myself to engage in their conversation, all the while keenly aware of how easily their chemistry danced in the air, igniting feelings of jealousy and desire within me. As we wrapped up the evening, I excused myself to the kitchen under the pretext of grabbing more drinks. I needed a moment to collect my thoughts, to extinguish the fire of anger and intrigue swirling inside me. I poured a glass of bourbon, savoring the rich, smoky flavor as I leaned against the counter, breathing deeply. Moments later, Ariana appeared in the doorway, her presence instantly electrifying the air. The soft fabric of her dress clung to her curves, accentuating the way she moved with a graceful confidence that still sent shivers down my spine. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern, but her eyes flickered with something deeper, an unspoken tension lingering between us. "Yeah, just needed a moment," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "You and Mark seem to be having a good time." She sighed, the sound heavy with emotion. "He's just a friend, Christopher. You know that, right?" "Do I?" I challenged, stepping closer, my heart racing at the proximity. "You two seem awfully close." "I don't mean to make you uncomfortable," she said, her eyes searching mine for reassurance. "He's just supportive, that's all. You know how hard work can be." I closed the gap between us, feeling a mix of desire and frustration as I leaned against the counter, our bodies almost touching. "And what about us?" I whispered, my breath warm against her skin. "What do we have?" Ariana's breath hitched, and for a moment, I saw her walls begin to crumble. "We have history. But things have changed," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I could feel the heat radiating between us, and my pulse quickened. "Then let's change that," I urged, my fingers brushing against her arm, igniting a spark that traveled through me. "Let's remind ourselves of what we used to have." The intensity in her gaze shifted as she leaned closer, her lips parting slightly. "I want to, Christopher. I really do," she murmured, and in that moment, I saw a flicker of the passion that had once burned brightly between us. But before we could bridge the distance completely, Mark's laughter echoed from the living room, pulling us back to reality. The sound shattered the moment like glass, and I stepped back, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. "Let's get back before he thinks something's wrong," I said, forcing a smile as I turned to lead the way. As we re-entered the living room, the atmosphere felt charged. Mark was animatedly discussing a new fitness regimen, oblivious to the charged tension between me and Ariana. I settled back into the conversation, but my mind was racing, calculating my next move. I needed to uncover the truth behind their friendship, and the only way to do that was to play along, to keep my friends close and my enemies closer. After Mark left for the night, I turned to Ariana, the air heavy with unspoken words. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady yet filled with urgency. "Of course," she replied, a hint of apprehension in her eyes. We moved to the living room, the soft glow of the lamps casting shadows on the walls, and I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I don't want to fight, Ariana, but I need to know where we stand. I can feel the distance, and I hate it." She looked down, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her dress. "I feel it too," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "It's just complicated." "Complicated how?" I pressed, leaning forward, desperate for clarity. "Mark has been there for me," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He listens. He understands the pressure I'm under at work." A part of me seethed with jealousy, but another part of me recognized the vulnerability in her words. "But what about us? What do you want?" I asked, my heart pounding as I braced myself for her response. "I want to feel like we used to, Christopher. I miss that intimacy, that connection," she said, her eyes locking onto mine. "But I don't know how to get it back." In that moment, I felt a surge of hope. "Then let's find it," I urged, my voice thick with emotion. "Let's start right now." Without thinking, I reached for her, my hands cupping her face as I leaned in, capturing her lips with mine. The kiss ignited a spark, one that felt both familiar and foreign. I felt her melt against me, her body responding as it once had, and I poured all my longing, my need, into that kiss. Ariana responded, her hands sliding around my waist, pulling me closer as we explored the depths of our connection. The taste of her lips was intoxicating, a blend of sweetness and wine that sent waves of desire coursing through me. It felt like coming home after a long journey. But the nagging doubts lingered at the edge of my consciousness, whispering reminders of the unsteady ground beneath us. I deepened the kiss, losing myself in the moment, wanting to forget the complications, if only for a little while. As we pulled away, breathless, I searched her eyes for assurance. "This is just the beginning," I murmured, my heart racing with the possibilities that lay ahead. Ariana nodded, a glimmer of hope shining in her eyes. I want that, Christopher. I really do, she echoed, and in that moment I believed her. We spent the rest of the night wrapped in each other's arms, the intimacy slowly rebuilding like a fragile structure rising from the ashes of betrayal. I knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but as long as we faced them together, there was still a chance for us. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was still a lingering shadow in our lives, a specter that could either drive us apart or bring us back together. I would have to navigate this new terrain carefully, and I was ready to fight for what we had. As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help but wonder how long I could keep my suspicions at bay and what it would take to finally confront the truth that lay at the heart of our unraveling marriage. The days that followed were a delicate dance, a balancing act between rekindling the intimacy with Ariana and the unsettling presence of Mark. I tried to push my doubts aside, focusing on the small moments we shared, the laughter over dinner, the stolen kisses in the kitchen, the warmth of her body against mine as we curled up on the couch to watch our favorite shows. Yet, each time Ariana's phone buzzed, a jolt of anxiety shot through me, the fear of who might be reaching out gnawing at the edges of my mind. One evening, after a long week, we decided to have a spontaneous date night. I surprised Ariana by cooking her favorite dish, creamy fettuccine alfredo, sprinkled with fresh parsley and accompanied by a crisp Chardonnay. The aroma filled the air as I set the table with candles, the flickering flames casting a warm glow that transformed our dining room into a cozy escape from the outside world. When Ariana stepped into the room, her eyes lit up, and a smile broke across her face. "Wow, Christopher, this looks amazing!" she exclaimed, her excitement infectious. "Just wanted to remind you of how much I appreciate you," I replied, my heart swelling at her reaction. "Let's eat before it gets cold." As we settled down to eat, the atmosphere shifted. The wine flowed, laughter filled the air, and the connection we'd been trying to rebuild felt stronger than it had in weeks. We shared stories and dreams, the conversation flowing effortlessly, but my mind occasionally flickered back to Mark, wondering if he had any part in this rekindled fire. After dinner, I cleared the table while Ariana poured us another glass of wine, her movements fluid and graceful. When I returned, I found her standing by the window, gazing out at the stars. The moonlight illuminated her silhouette, making her appear ethereal. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" I asked, stepping closer. "Very," she replied softly, turning to face me. "It's nice to have this time together." I took a sip of my wine, feeling emboldened by the evening's warmth. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about us lately," I said, moving closer to her. "About what we want and how we can get there." Ariana's eyes searched mine, a mixture of hope and uncertainty flickering within them. "I've been thinking about that too," she admitted, biting her lip. "I want us to be strong again, to find that spark." In that moment, the air thickened with anticipation, and I stepped closer, my heart racing. "Then let's not waste any more time," I murmured, brushing my fingers along her cheek. Ariana leaned into my touch, her breath hitching as I closed the distance between us. Our lips met in a heated kiss, one filled with urgency and longing, reigniting the flames of desire that had simmered beneath the surface for far too long. The taste of her wine lingered on my tongue, intoxicating and sweet. As the kiss deepened, I felt her hands slide around my waist, pulling me closer until our bodies were flush against one another. The heat radiating from her was electric, and I could feel the pounding of my heart echoing in my ears. I pushed her gently against the wall, the coolness of the surface contrasting with the warmth of our bodies as I explored the contours of her curves. "God, I've missed this," I whispered against her lips, tracing my fingers down her arms, feeling the softness of her skin. Ariana responded with a soft moan, tilting her head back as I trailed kisses down her neck, savoring the taste of her skin. Each touch ignited a fire within me, a desire that had been stoked by the tension of the past weeks. I felt her shudder against me, and it spurred me on, pulling her closer as if to fuse our bodies together. "Christopher," she gasped, her voice breathless as I captured her lips again, drowning in the taste of her desire. I felt her hands weave into my hair, holding me in place as we lost ourselves in each other. The world outside faded away, leaving only the two of us wrapped in this moment. Just then, her phone buzzed loudly from the kitchen, breaking the spell that had enveloped us. We both froze, the weight of reality crashing back in, the tension of what had been lurking beneath the surface threatening to rear its head once more. "Let it go," I urged, my voice thick with need as I pressed my forehead against hers, trying to pull her back into the intimacy we had just shared. But Ariana's eyes flickered with hesitation. "It could be important," she murmured, glancing toward the kitchen. "Or it could be just Mark," I said, a hint of bitterness slipping into my tone. The words hung in the air, charged with unspoken accusations. She bit her lip, clearly torn. "I just need to check," she said, pulling away slightly, and I felt a pang of disappointment wash over me. I watched as she reluctantly stepped away to retrieve her phone, and I struggled to rein in my frustration. As she read the message, I felt the distance grow again, the warmth between us dissipating. "It's just work," she said, a hint of relief in her voice, but my heart raced with suspicion. "Good," I replied, forcing a smile as I tried to mask my emotions. "Let's not let anything come between us tonight." We returned to the intimacy of the moment, but the magic felt slightly dulled, the shadow of Mark lingering in the background. I couldn't shake the image of him watching us, his presence a reminder of the fragility of our situation. As the night wore on, we tried to reignite the passion, but the air was thick with tension, the undertones of our conversation hinting at the issues still left unresolved. I kissed her deeply again, hoping to recapture that electric connection, but I could sense her mind drifting, the doubt and guilt slowly creeping back into her expression. "Can we just forget for a moment?" I breathed against her lips, desperate to push aside the chaos in my mind. Ariana nodded, her eyes reflecting a mixture of longing and uncertainty. "I want to, Christopher. I really do." With renewed determination, I pulled her back into my embrace, our bodies melding together as I poured every ounce of desire into our kiss. The world outside faded away, leaving only the intoxicating heat of our connection, and for that brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that we could rebuild what had been lost. But the reality of our situation loomed large, and as I held her close, I couldn't help but wonder how long I could keep the truth at bay and what it would take to finally confront the storm that lay ahead. The love we shared felt like a flickering candle, bright but vulnerable, and I was determined to protect it from the darkness that threatened to snuff it out. The following days settled into a rhythm, a blend of intimacy and tension as I navigated the complexities of our renewed relationship with Ariana. Each evening, we found ourselves wrapped in each other's arms, the chemistry igniting with every touch and whispered promise. Yet the specter of Mark loomed over us, an unwelcome presence that tinged our moments of closeness with a hint of uncertainty. One Friday night, after a long week, I suggested we have a quiet evening in, just the two of us. I cooked a simple but delicious meal, and we poured ourselves generous glasses of wine. The mood felt lighter, a refreshing change from the heaviness that had weighed on us in recent weeks. As we sat together on the couch, the flickering light from the TV casting shadows across the room, I reached for her hand, intertwining our fingers. "I'm really glad we're doing this," I said softly, looking into her eyes. "It feels good to just be together again." Ariana smiled, a genuine warmth radiating from her. "Me too. I've missed this, us," she replied, leaning closer. With the tension between us easing, I felt emboldened. I leaned in, brushing my lips against hers, feeling the familiar spark ignite once more. The kiss deepened, and I felt her body lean into mine, the softness of her curves pressing against my chest. It was intoxicating, and I lost myself in the taste of her, the lingering sweetness of the wine mingling with the warmth of her mouth. As our kiss grew more fervent, I couldn't help but slide my hands along her waist, savoring the way her body responded to my touch. I pulled her closer, feeling the heat radiate between us as I deepened the kiss, letting my fingers roam along her back, tracing the curve of her spine. Ariana gasped softly, a sound that fueled my desire, and I couldn't resist the urge to explore further. I pulled away just enough to catch her gaze, the desire in her eyes mirroring my own. "Do you remember our nights at the lake?" I whispered, my breath mingling with hers. Of course, she replied, her voice thick with longing. Those were some of my favorite memories. Let's make new ones, I murmured, leaning in to capture her lips again, this time with an urgency that left us both breathless. I felt the tension melting away as I pressed her back against the cushions, our bodies sinking into the softness of the couch. Ariana's fingers tangled in my hair, pulling me closer as I trailed kisses down her neck, relishing the warmth of her skin beneath my lips. Christopher, she breathed, her voice trembling with anticipation. With every kiss, I felt the boundaries of our relationship expanding, the lines of trust and desire intertwining. I wanted to show her just how much she meant to me, to remind her of the passion we had once shared. I shifted my body, positioning myself above her, our eyes locking as I captured her gaze, wanting her to feel the depth of my feelings. You're so beautiful, I whispered, my hands sliding under her shirt, tracing the soft skin of her sides. I could feel her shiver beneath my touch, the reaction sending a rush of exhilaration through me. I want you to know how much I love you. The intensity in her eyes sparked a fire within me, and I leaned down, kissing her deeply as my hands explored further, pulling her shirt up just enough to feel the warmth of her skin against my palms. She responded, arching her back slightly, her body inviting me in, and I couldn't help but lose myself in the moment. As our kisses grew more passionate, I felt the world around us fade away. I was consumed by the warmth of her body and the intoxicating scent of her hair. I wanted to erase the doubts that lingered in the back of my mind, to reclaim the intimacy we had almost lost. Suddenly, the moment was interrupted by the unmistakable sound of a phone buzzing on the coffee table. We both froze, the air thick with tension as reality crashed back in. My heart sank, knowing it was likely a message from Mark. Should we check? Ariana asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the excitement of the moment dampened by the intrusion of the outside world. I took a deep breath, the jealousy twisting in my gut again. It might be important, I said reluctantly, but the bitterness seeped into my tone. Ariana's expression wavered, and she reluctantly pushed away from me, reaching for her phone. As she read the message, I watched her expression shift, a flicker of concern crossing her face. It's just work stuff, she said, a hint of relief lacing her voice. But the warmth of our moment had dissipated, replaced by the chill of uncertainty. I took a sip of my wine, trying to mask my disappointment. Let's not let this ruin our night, I urged, hoping to steer us back to the intimacy we had shared moments before. As she settled back beside me, I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. Can we pick up where we left off? I asked, my heart racing as I leaned in for another kiss, desperate to reclaim that spark. Ariana met me halfway, her lips finding mine once more, and I felt the familiar warmth begin to return. I cradled her face in my hands, pouring all my longing into that kiss, determined to push aside the interruptions and reclaim the connection we had forged. But the tension lingered in the back of my mind, a constant reminder that we were not out of the woods yet. I wanted to believe that we could overcome the challenges ahead, but the shadow of Mark hung over us like a dark cloud, threatening to rain on our fragile reunion. As the night wore on, we drifted back into the warmth of each other's embrace, the intimacy slowly rebuilding. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that our journey was just beginning, and I would have to confront the truth that lay ahead, whatever that truth may be. I was ready to fight for us, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. The path to redemption was fraught with challenges, and the only way forward was together. As the evening deepened, the warmth of our rekindled intimacy wrapped around us like a soft blanket, but I couldn't ignore the unease that still lingered in the corners of my mind. I held Ariana close, her body fitting perfectly against mine, yet the unresolved tension between us felt like an unwelcome guest in our home. Ariana, I said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. We need to talk about Mark. She tensed slightly, pulling back just enough to search my eyes. Do we have to? She asked, a hint of sadness in her voice. We do, I replied, my tone steady yet gentle. I can't shake the feeling that he's come between us, even if it's not intentional. I need to know how you feel about him. Her expression softened, and she took a deep breath. Christopher, I care about you. I love you. But Mark has been there for me during a time when I felt lost. It doesn't mean I want to be with him, she explained, her honesty cutting through the tension. I understand, I said, my heart aching at her words. But I need to know that you're committed to us, that you're willing to put in the effort to rebuild what we had. I can't fight a ghost. Ariana nodded, her gaze steady. I am committed, Christopher. I want us to work through this. I miss you and I miss us, she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. I felt a rush of relief wash over me, yet the doubt still lingered. Then let's set boundaries, I suggested. Let's agree that our relationship comes first and that we'll communicate openly about anything that feels off. She smiled, a flicker of hope lighting her eyes. I can do that. I promise to be more mindful of how my interactions with Mark affect you. Thank you, I said, pulling her into a tight embrace. I just want to move forward, to put this behind us. As I held her close, the warmth of her body grounded me, and I felt the weight of our shared burden beginning to lift. We had taken the first step toward healing, and the road ahead, though uncertain, felt a little less daunting. As the night continued, I leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss filled with renewed passion. It was different this time, filled with a deeper understanding and a commitment to one another that hadn't been there before. Our lips moved together, a slow dance of rediscovery that reignited the flames of our love. With every kiss, every touch, I felt the walls we had built around ourselves begin to crumble. I explored the familiar curves of her body with renewed fervor, my hands gliding over her skin as if I were reacquainting myself with a long-lost treasure. The warmth of her breath mingled with mine, igniting a fire within me that felt all-consuming. As the evening wore on, we found ourselves wrapped in each other, the world outside forgotten. I felt a sense of urgency, wanting to cherish this moment before any doubt could creep back in. Our bodies moved together, a rhythm we both remembered, and I lost myself in the intimacy we had fought to reclaim. I whispered sweet nothings against her skin, tracing my fingers along her collarbone, savoring the way she responded to my touch. You're everything to me, I murmured, feeling the connection between us grow stronger with every heartbeat. Ariana's fingers tangled in my hair, pulling me closer as she arched her back, inviting me to explore further. I need you, Christopher, she whispered, her voice thick with desire. Show me how much I mean to you. With that, I took my time, savoring every moment as we lost ourselves in each other. The connection we shared felt electric, and I knew, deep down, that this was the beginning of a new chapter for us. As dawn approached, we lay entwined in each other's arms, the world outside slowly waking up to a new day. The light of the morning sun streamed through the window, casting a warm glow around us, illuminating the promise of a fresh start. Whatever happens, we'll face it together, I said, looking into her eyes, knowing that we had the strength to overcome the challenges ahead. Ariana smiled, her eyes sparkling with hope. Together, she echoed, and in that moment I knew we could conquer anything that came our way. In the quiet of the morning, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Our journey was far from over, but I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, knowing that love, honesty, and commitment would guide us through. We had faced the storm, and together, we emerged stronger, ready to write the next chapter of our lives, together.